KCRW sponsors include A24, presenting Moonlight, a film chronicling 3 chapters in the life of a young black man discovering his identity and experiencing first love as he moves from childhood into manhood. In theaters now.
Hi, I'm Elvis Mitchell, and thanks for listening to The Treatment. Some of the most entertaining stories produced today, however, are not on the big screen, but they can be heard on KCRW's Unfictional. Intimate stories and artful documentaries crafted by some of the most talented radio producers across the world. Check it out. You can find Unfictional on KCRW's iTunes page. From KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, it's The Treatment. Welcome to The Treatment. I'm Elvis Mitchell. My guest, Oscar Award-winning, Emmy Award-winning, Golden Globe Award-winning actress Helen Hunt has been directed by filmmakers from Robert Zemeckis to Robert Altman, all the Bobs. Her second film as director is Ride. She also stars in the film and co-produced as well. Helen, first of all, it's good to have you back.
I'm so happy to be here.
And tell us a little bit what Ride is about, because that title sort of makes it seem like it might be kind of pleasant, sort of driving across the country kind of a movie.
Yes. It's not a driving across the country movie, but it is sort of. It's about a New Yorker, a born and bred, diehard New Yorker, sort of type A editor of New Yorker magazine, who is, one might say, a little too close to her 19-year-old son. They're both writers. They both need each other, maybe too much for reasons that unfold during the movie. And he's going to NYU. He leaves for his summer break to spend the summer with his dad right in this neighborhood here in Santa Monica. And he writes her and says, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to be in California and be happy and do less and surf. And she finds this the most horrifying missive she might receive and gets on a plane and follows him till she literally crashes into him. And he says, you don't understand me. Don't talk to me till you can stand up on a surfboard. So a good portion of the movie is watching the least likely candidate on earth try the most humbling sport God ever thought of.
Well, we see her in the beginning of the movie where she's swimming and keeping her neck literally above the water.
I don't have to do your hair twice in a day, Elvis. Priorities.
But that's funny, because I wanted to say, in directing terms, just the sort of the move from your first film to this, I mean, you found a way at the beginning of the film to create a sort of a passage of time montage that I thought was really kind of wonderful. And you do it again too, because at the point where your son moves across country, good to see how basically time really expands for him and contracts for you. I thought those were really two sort of interesting storytelling points. Talk about finding your way towards those.
Well, I think I'm learning now that I'm just finished my sophomore effort. I think what I'm learning as a writer is that the beginning is this grand opportunity where you're forgiven all sorts of things. You're forgiven things told boldly, visually. You're sometimes even forgiven a flashback or a piece of maybe not as elegant sort of information, things you have to know that you want to just stuff in the cheeks of the audience. And then it gets less easy as the movie goes on, and you have to sort of try to be elegant and surprising. But I tried to take advantage of those first 10 or so minutes where I think you can be a little bit bolder to get some of the work done of what you need the audience to know to follow the story.
I just thought, because what happens in this is not only does time become a character, but the passage of time in Southern California versus New York are two very different things, aren't they?
They are, for sure. And this movie, I originally had a bunch of flashbacks in there to open the movie, and I knew, I'm cringing now, as you can see when I think about them, because I just thought, I know I don't want flashbacks. I know I don't, but I don't know how else to do it. And then you just sit there like a rabbi chewing on this piece of material, hoping to make some kind of sense of it. And it occurred to me, maybe I could tell these 3 pages of the script in one shot, which is how I started the movie. I tried to just tell their whole emotional backstory in one locked-off shot, and that seemed to work.
Not only that, but also we get to see her evolution into independence. I mean, she's stealing moments to herself while her son is sleeping, to this kind of independence and this empty nest that this hallway represents.
Yeah, I don't know much about myself, and I don't know much about myself as a filmmaker, but I have noticed that I've made 2 movies where parents can only sleep if they're outside their sleeping children's door.
Yes.
One character sleeps in the room, in the case of Then She Found Me, and then with this, she can only fall asleep if she can actually hear her son breathing inside. So, that must say something about my priorities.
I think it says something, too, about the kind of relationships that the archetypal mother and the real flesh and blood mother. And both these films are kind of about that. This the representation, almost totemic terms, of what a mother is versus the real life kind of effect that a mother has on somebody's life. Both movies have dealt with that, haven't they?
They do. I think I chew on that all the time. What is the good mother in the archetypal sense? What does that mean? And now most of us are walking around just trying to be that for ourselves and maybe our children if we're lucky. But I am interested in how do you make that up? And then if you're imperfect, like the mothers in the two movies I've made, how do you, together, you and the child, if the child is grown, which they are in these movies, how do you make it out of like popsicle sticks and tape and glue and the kind of clumsy way we're all trying to parent ourselves through our lives?
And it's interesting, too, is the kind of relationships that fathers have in these movies as well. I mean, the fathers, these figures who don't quite really land in both of these movies.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, are there any fathers in any of the movies? I can't think of them.
Well, they
don't really land. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. And that's because I guess I like the relationship of this movie, the way that mother and son kind of fight back and have these boundaries, too mean.
Yeah, and my hope was, I mean, you're right to point at Philip Roth, not that I'm touching the hem of his skirt, but I definitely imagined two women I knew, my parents' generation, that were so smart, just these brains. They didn't even stop to pay attention to how big their own brains were. They just were working so fast and brilliantly. One a composer, one an acting teacher and writer. And their sons were in the same professions they were, and there was a connection there, not just the mother trying to devour the son wanting, if you've ever written anything, you know you'll do anything to get the ending to your story. And when I'm in the middle of writing a screenplay, I will beg, borrow, and steal anything to figure out how to tell it. So the son in this movie is following her around as much as she's following him around. He needs her as much as she needs him. So my goal was, it wasn't just a story about a woman who has to let go, but about two people who need two decent people, two decent, smart, loving people who know that their brains are not their best friends anymore and they have to somehow burn what they had to the ground and plant little seeds and hope something new will grow.
But also, too, certainly in this film, the idea of basically carrying on an artistic pursuit from generation to generation, which is something that you definitely know very well, don't you?
I do. My father isn't as complicated and horrible as the character I wrote for myself to play in this movie, but I had all the beauty of what it's like to be nurtured, to be supported, to be understood when you say, I think I like this, I think I want to do this, I think I want to tell stories. You know, I had the very best version of that.
Because I just wonder for you, because there's a description of what a story should be. I guess it's surprising but inevitable.
Yes.
And that's almost, as I heard that, I just thought that's something that almost a kind of ethos an actor might want to have.
It's just stolen from Aristotle, actually.
Yeah, but
but we could say that I thought of it. But for sure, it's what probably every artist want. You want to feel a sense of recognition when you look at a painting, and you want to be shocked because you've never seen anything like it. And that's what I want when I go to a movie, for sure. When I read a book, I want to feel like someone has met me in some very lonely place I thought only I existed, and I also want to be taken by surprise.
The thing that runs through both these films is that verbal wrestling. I wouldn't say jousting. I mean, it's really a full-on sort of like contact sport, the way people converse in your films.
Yeah, it is. And I don't even know that I do that, but the people in these two movies do. I grew up around smart, fast, funny people. And by grow up, I mean, mad about you. And the women that I had in mind when I wrote this that I alluded to before, they just had these brilliant brains. And being funny is part of that. It's part of the currency, that they are generous with. Humor can be such a generous thing at that awkward, painful moment where you're smarter than the other guy, or you have more money than the other guy, or the other guy's going through something harder than you are. Humor can be this giant gift that lets everybody off the hook. So I think one of the few redeeming qualities my character has in the beginning of the movie is she has that.
It's the treatment. I'm talking to second-time feature film director Helen Hunt. Her new film as writer-director is Ride. I guess I want to ask you, too, about what New York means to you, because in both these films, New York, and even though you're a Southern California kid, New York plays a really big presence, and it's kind of a scary place in both of these movies.
I mean, I'm a New York City kid, too, so I really grew up in both places. So the tug of war, it was very fun for me to write in this movie, the tug of war between the two, the intellectual, cultural rigor of one place and the deep breath that the other can provide. I will say that many brilliant New Yorkers love to rag on Los Angeles. And to be honest, the people I know from here don't really need to rag on New York very much. It speaks for itself when it stresses you beyond repair. But it makes me laugh. One woman that was a very close friend of my parents, and I grew up with her sons, one of the women that I thought of when I wrote this movie, she just blamed many ills on the sort of what she saw lacking in Los Angeles. And, it's such an incredible, rich place. It was a great way to make her really stupid, actually, to rag on a place as rich as Los Angeles. I tried to build a character who was pretty insufferable, lacked humility, intellectually aggressive, so that I could introduce her to this character called the Pacific Ocean that would pummel her into these qualities she lacked. So that's the ride of the movie, is her being pummeled into some kind of humility, and then even the beginning of some kind of grace, hopefully.
Well, even the way the Luke Wilson character describes the surfboard versus the ocean she could be the surfboard, that inflexible thing versus this thing that's constantly moving.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is that metaphor of her coming in to anything as sort of rigid as she could possibly be against this thing that's constantly moving.
That's right. It's the rigidity of the intellect versus Mother Nature, and spoiler alert, put your money on Mother Nature, for sure.
She wins every time. As one of the stars of Twister would know.
That's right.
But one of the things I was just saying to you before we got started, as somebody who, to say amateur surfer would be wildly overstating my relationship to surfing. But the first time you go off a board and you go in head first and you don't know when you're going to come up or when you're going to hit the bottom, there are a few things more terrifying than that first fall off a board.
It's horrible. And then, as if the terror weren't enough, there's the humiliation on top of it. So it's a double whammy of horrible. In fact, the first time I took a surf lesson, it was awful. I had a teacher who Luke's character is not based on, who screamed at me, it was sort of like being on where the 101 and the 405 meet, except they were all beginner surfers on soft top surfboards crashing into each other. And I got out of the water with really tears in my throat, humiliation, and said, never again. And then after a while I thought, well, anything that is getting under my skin to that extent, I should probably A, do again, and B, write about. So that's kind of how this movie happened.
But the idea of also sort of being tested by things is something that you like too. I mean, that these unforeseen circumstances that really test you. I mean, it's family, and then she found me. But here it's family and it's nature. I mean, what is that about, that sort of idea of sort of having to undergo these tests?
Well, I mean, they're both sort of movies about something like God that I can't call God because I don't know what it is, but something bigger than you. The first movie I made was really about feeling betrayed by that something bigger than you. I played a conservative Jew in the first one who had a real sense that God would catch her, and then he doesn't, and she has to reevaluate the whole thing.
But there's even a call back to that. Well, I thought you had him. No, I thought you had him in this film.
Yeah. It's that feeling of wanting so badly to feel caught, and then life tends to drop you intermittently. If you're lucky, it's intermittently. And so this is really a movie. The last movie I made, I based on this James Hillman essay, and we talked about that when I was here, called Betrayal. And then I showed Hillman, before he died, this script.
Oh.
And he said, I've got something for you. And he gave me an essay called The Bad Mother, about the danger inherent in the mother-child relationship. If the child does all the playing and the mother does all the policing, something very bad can happen to everybody. And so he talks about finger painting in that essay, but the idea is get dirt between your toes, play, or both of you will suffer for it. So this is sort of a movie about someone who reluctantly learns how to play, kicking and screaming. And then his wife, after James died, his wife, Margot, who's a dear friend of mine, said, I have something for you. And she gave me a collection of poetry that's supposed to be for men, but it's not. It's for men and me, if it's for men. But included in there is an essay about what he calls loving the world anyway. Can you love the world anyway? So I just plucked that out and put it in Luke Wilson's mouth and had him talk about his own mother. And my character says, what did you want? He says, I wanted her to love the world anyway. So if I had to have one sentence that the movie's about, it's about my own struggle to love the world anyway.
We'll take a break. My guest, who apparently reads poetry only for men, is Helen Hunt. Her new film as writer-director is Riot is the Treatment. There's more to come. Stay with us.
This podcast is produced by KCRW, a nonprofit public radio station based in Los Angeles. We rely on listeners like you. Support the podcasts you love by becoming a member. Go to kcrw.com/join.
Welcome back. Second-time filmmaker Helen Hunt is here. She's directed her second film. She also wrote and stars in and co-produced, I'm exhausted just saying all that stuff, the movie is Ride. But one of the things I want to ask you about is that you've worked a number of times with actors who direct. And I wonder what you got from them as compared to what you get from people who are trained directors who've done that a lot.
The best directors I've worked with are either actors or they've really have studied acting and understand acting in a deep way. It's all the difference in the world. When somebody gives you a piece of direction and they don't understand acting, there's this minute where you have to take what they say, kind of hide what you plan, translate it into something that won't ruin what you care about, and then try to, blend them together so you're doing your job, which is to give her or him the movie that she or he wants. But when you work with someone who understands actors and somebody whispers an actual verb in your ear, something you can do, or a secret that maybe you keep from the other actor, those are the things that bring actors to life. And so the times that I've gotten to do that, it's a joy. And I love every part of movie making, I've realized. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's getting to whisper something in the ear of a trained actor that just lets them have a little bit more fun or lets them go a little farther than they thought was okay. That's a joyful experience.
Because I just wondered if that was one of the things that maybe inspired you to want to direct film, is being directed by actors. I had so many people have come here who talk about the difference between an actor who's directed versus somebody who would just do it faster or stand here, say this, and then move back over there.
I can't say. The only thing that made me want to do this job is the storytelling part of it. I didn't sit on a set as a kid and then an adult and say, I want that job. That job looks exhausting from the sidelines. But when I started writing, it really didn't feel right to take something I had given birth to and hand it to someone else to raise. That just didn't feel correct to me. So it really came more out of my desire to tell these couple of stories than a desire to say action or cut or have that job.
I guess I say that too just because in this film there are a lot of character actors who we've seen around a bunch, David Zaya, and so many people who it's just great to get them to see a chance to not just be a standby, but really live in the moment with the other performers.
David Zayas is so good. He plays, my character can't drive, as the two women that I based this on couldn't. It's perfectly acceptable to be a brilliant New Yorker, very successful, and say, I don't care to drive, thank you. But then they come to California and they're in bad shape. So she hires a driver who drives her around in a town car with a giant yellow surfboard.
One of my favorite
moments
is the first time it pulls over to near the boardwalk and the surfboard is sticking out of the sunroof.
Yes, I have a sticker for you. That's that image. So, he's the scarecrow, basically. I got very excited about looking at the whole movie from his point of view and what does he think about her? I think he's worried about her. She's too skinny and too worried and too stressed and might get hurt. And it was just beautiful. This is one of the moments where I didn't feel particularly in charge when I was writing. Out just came this guy who cared about this woman inexplicably, and he just stepped in, and I couldn't imagine anybody else playing it.
But see, this gets to, there's some of these characters that embody either the heart or the head. And he's somebody who...
He's a lot of heart.
Yeah.
For sure, you're right.
Who can see what she is and she can't.
Yeah. And, casting Brenton really changed that. I originally imagined an actor...
And he's the actor who plays your son.
He's the actor who plays my son. And so I imagined two people that were very similar, that both his character and my character were twisted in these sort of tortured brains that had been sharpened too much. And then Brenton walked in and was his beautiful self. He's just a soulful, sweet guy. It doesn't mean he's not smart, but he's not that, there weren't two people with daggers coming out of their eyes. And so that's when the movie teaches you what it is. It then became about this intellectually aggressive woman meeting this dear person who wants to keep up, but doesn't want to sacrifice his life to keeping up. And so, my hope is that the turns in the story that happen in the end allow him to move towards something sharper and her to move towards something softer. But that came to life because of the casting, which I wasn't planning on at all. I wasn't planning on hiring an actor like Brenton, but he came in and wanted it. After doing a big, huge movie, he wanted it and wanted it bad, and I recognized that in myself, just not having ego about, I just did a big movie, but seeing that this was a part that he was interested in, and And so the movie was reinvented when he was cast.
It's interesting, too, because he's really kind of thrown to the deep end because all the stuff beginning of the movie between mother and son is a series of arguments.
Right.
And you have to be able to see that there's a relationship inside those fights, that they aren't just competitions, even though they are, but that there is something inside of there, and that's a lot to ask of somebody.
Yeah, I think the character that I wrote for myself is someone who may be brilliant and may be compassionate, but doesn't see the possibility that the way she views the world is one of many ways. I just don't think that's in her worldview. Of course you do this for another person. Of course you write it like this. Of course the way I see it is the way it is. Which, the ocean is a good anecdote for that.
It's funny because she almost strikes me as being the kind of New Yorker writer of the 70s rather than the current New Yorker, which is tweets and Facebooks and all that kind of stuff.
And I think all of this goes into her crankiness. Because I remember what it's like to be her, and I'm, not unlike that, just a sort of crankiness about the way things are now.
Well, my guess, who may be the only person alive who directed both Bette Midler and Salman Rushdie in the same movie, is Helen Hunt. Her new film as writer-director and star is Ride. But that idea of somebody who is basically holding positions like a pointer, who is not going to change. But it's all intellectual. And the idea of her fighting with everything and just the idea of doing slapstick on a surfboard is a pretty terrifying thing to do yourself as a second-time filmmaker, isn't it?
Yeah, I wanted it to be, we're talking about all this heady stuff, but I wanted it to be I Love Lucy in the water. Straight up.
She's really, it's
I Love
funny
Lucy.
stuff, but she's really,
but bold.
She's even fighting with her wetsuit.
Yeah,
that's very slapstick.
Yeah, and I will say that I have no confidence that anybody would like the movie, but I had confidence that I wanted to tell this story. I knew the story really well, and I could explain it to members of the crew and artists around me and all that. I knew what I wanted it to be.
Is that key to you, to be able to explain it to people?
Yeah, because you certainly don't do it alone. You have all this in your head, and then you get an incredible cinematographer and a brilliant production designer and an editor, and you want to say, this is what I see. Can you see it with me? And if you see it differently, tell me, because maybe I'll change what I see.
Okay, exactly.
But if you don't change me, I'm going to stick with this, and I need you to be on board with this. But I will say, doing I Love Lucy slapstick in the middle of the ocean and directing yourself, I did have a few sinking moments of like, what am I doing? Literally sinking moments. And one moment of yelling a piece of direction to Luke only to have a wave just fill my mouth with water. So yes, there were times, maybe more than the first time, when I thought, this is a strange and bold decision to do this.
But it also seemed to, like, I guess was just wondering, because the last time you were here, when we were talking during the break, you were telling me a little bit about what this movie was going to become. And it sounded to me even then like you were doing something that felt like a 180 from the movie you had just directed.
I guess it is, although, it's about all the same stuff. It's about...
But there's much more physical comedy in this.
For sure. It's broader comedically, and one could argue darker and sadder, because there is, one of the hardest things somebody can go through in it. But the aspiration was to stretch that wide. And I thought about, there's a piece of very sad story that's revealed in the movie, and I thought about losing that because it wasn't a card I wanted to play in order to make her sympathetic. Yeah, I really didn't. I wanted to find a way to not have that piece of story in there, but if I want to tell a story about loving the world anyway, I needed to really test her. And when you get to be older than 25, which I will concede that I am, when you have to love the world anyway, life has real teeth at this point, I find, as I look around at my own life and those of the people that I love. So loving the world anyway is a taller order. So I decided that I would keep this very sharp-toothed piece of story that she has lived through, and just prayed that it would be surprising and inevitable and not surprising and pandering for her sympathy. That's my hope, is that it is surprising and inevitable, and the truth is I know plenty of people who've been through it.
As you say this, though, I find myself thinking that the first film was a lot more sort of narrative-driven. I mean, there were sort of plot points that you hit.
There was maybe more story. I had to have great faith this time that it would, and a very smart screenwriter friend of mine read it and didn't like it at all and said, you can't just keep having her be pummeled over and over by these waves. And it was very individuating to say, I think I'm going to take this leap of faith that if we're on board, no pun intended, with this character, and she wants something that badly, we will care. I thought about Castaway, which I'm in briefly, but But separate from that, I loved it so much. And I loved the idea of it even before I read it. And I thought I could watch this guy try to light this fire and feed himself for a long time without being bored. I didn't need more story. I cared about this guy, and he wanted the basic things we all want. He wanted to be home. He wanted to be loved. He wanted to eat. He wanted shelter. So there could have been another hour of him on that island and I would have not been bored. So I was trying to apply the same theory to this, that she wants this so badly. Standing up on this board means maybe I get one more shot with my kid, and that we would, cranky as she is, be with her.
But the other thing, too, is that I like the way the women are treated here. I mean, they're...
God, I hope so.
And this even goes back to Then She Found Me, that what these women all represent, these sort of different psychological, rather philosophical things. There are different points of view. And I wonder if that, for you, is something you do first. If you figure out what the character's point of view is, and then you write the character, if it goes the other way around.
I think you just desperately hope you have a story that sticks together. Like, in a way, that's everything. And that's so hard to get anyway. A story with a narrative that follows, that makes people want to not go get popcorn, but sit there. That's the dream. And then along the way, to bring that to life, the next aspiration is that the characters have all sorts of different things churning around inside them, and that they have a journey to take that changes them in ways that are surprising and inevitable. But it's story, 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 story. And I'm a humble student of how to do that. But I sure, after reading scripts for 150 years, I feel it when it's not right. I feel it when there's a scene that can be cut. I feel it when I'm cheating. I feel when, can I stick this one together with a piece of tape? Yes, I think I can. No, there's no way I can. I feel it when it's gone off the rails and I'm learning how to put it on the rails.
So let me ask you as a final question, what was it like the first time you saw the movie with friends and you showed it to people? What did you feel about it as you saw it? Because it's a big leap forward from the first movie, I think.
Yeah, that was a good day. The first day you see the footage cut together is terrible. Someone very smart said the movie's never as good as the dailies or as bad as the first assembly, and I had that experience twice. But the first time I showed it, filled with blemishes as it was, to a group of people, something very different happens. I have a real wish that people see this movie either in the movie theater or together, because it's a different movie when you see it in a group. I don't know why, but more so than even the first movie.
It's a comedy, so that's what
that's
works about
probably
it.
What it is. But then also what happens at the end seems to have more impact when people are together. So I felt like people seem to get it, and you never know. You never know if you make this thing and the lights come up and people scratch their head and look around and don't want to say anything because they don't know what they just saw. It felt like if I did a lot of work on it, which I did, I would have something that at least this group of people could hear. It was working on a frequency that they could hear and that they seemed to care about.
And you're happy with it now?
I'm happy with it now. We're talking in this deep, heady way. It's also meant to be this little teeny haiku. It's not even 90 minutes long. I want it to be this little whisper that makes people laugh and maybe makes people cry, and maybe in some way that they don't even know pokes at these deeper things that I care about. But that's meant to sneak up on you, not be the first or second or third thing that you experience.
Yeah, but there are enough undercurrents, if I may.
Yes, it's all water metaphors.
I'm sorry. Here. There's enough going on that there is something to be gleaned beneath the surface.
For sure, but it happens fast, and that was my goal.
It does happen fast.
It should just, again, wash over you, and you go, what just happened? That's what I was hoping for, not to belabor it, not to drive it home in some giant way, to say, I just had this breeze went by, and I think I felt something.
Well, I think you did that. Thanks so much for coming back, Helen.
Thank you so much. I love being here.
Oh, my pleasure. My guest, we won't use any more water metaphors. It's Helen Hunt. Her new film is writer, director, star, and co-producer is Ride. Our recording engineer who mixes the show is Melissa Morton. It's edited and produced by Jenny Radelet. I'm going to go put on a wetsuit. It's The Treatment. To catch up on past episodes of The Treatment, go to KCRW.com or listen on your smartphone with KCRW's mobile apps, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Treatment is produced and distributed by KCRW Santa Monica.